Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is a quick one. We're making almond stitch leg warmers that are sure to keep the cold weather at bay while keeping you stylish. Speaking of, by now y'all already know the drill. But just in case you knew, the most stylish modern crochet tutorials and patterns are here, with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 190 grams of yarn. That's 420 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you have to wear glasses. Yes, I wear both glasses and contacts, but not at the same time. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and I'll explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting these leg warmers started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that is in multiples of 8, the length that we like for the leg warmers to be, keeping in mind that we will have a top and bottom band as well. I'd like for mine to be just about 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 64. And I actually already have this portion of my leg warmers completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we are all going to do an additional 4 chains for everyone, and that's no matter what size we're making. So block off that last chain and start with 1, 2, 3, 4. That additional 4 chains counts as our base chain. Now we're all going to get started on our row 1. So start by blocking off that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's a turning chain. Now we're all going to do a set of 4 slip stitches. So into that chain that we blocked off, or into that second chain from our hook, bring your hook down into that chain. When we have these 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. We want to make sure that we're not pulling through too tightly, otherwise the falling rows could be too tight to work into. There's 1 slip stitch into the next. We're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops. That's our second. We need 4. So into the next with a third, and into the next with our 4th. Now that we have our 4 slip stitches, we're all going to do 4 half double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, into that next chain, insert with 1 half double crochet, into that next chain with our second, next chain with our third, and next chain with our 4th. From here, what we're going to do is continue to do our 4 slip stitches, 4 half doubles to reach the end of the row. Everyone's last set of stitches should be 4 slip stitches, then I'll meet you back to get started on row 2. We are back and our row 1 is complete. Now we're all going to get started on our row 2, but just as a really quick tip, for every even number row for this portion, every even number row is going to be a repeat of our previous odd number row. So if we're looking at our previous stitches, it ends with slip stitches. So our row 2 is going to start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, and continue to repeat all the way down. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 1 and flip. And like I said, we're all going to start with 4 back loop slip stitches. So we're going to find that last stitch from our previous row. Insert your hook into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, we need a total of 4, so into that next stitch is back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and once more to get a total of 4 stitches, my 4th back loop slip stitch. Now we're going to do 4 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that next stitch's back loop, insert with 1 back loop half, there's our first, into that next with our second, yarn over, into that next with our third, then yarn over, into that next with our fourth. And from here, we're going to continue to do 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our row 2. Now this is a 4-row repeat, so let's get started on a row 3. Every odd number row is going to be the opposite from what our previous row stitches look like. So just to talk you guys through it, since the last set of stitches was slip stitches, when we chain 2 and flip, the following 4 stitches is going to be 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, and continue doing that, making our way all the way down. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. Now for our row 3, we're all going to get started with 4 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that first stitch's back loop with our first, our second back loop half, our third back loop half, and then also our fourth. Once we have our first 4 half double crochets completed, then we're going to do 4 back loop slip stitches. So into that next stitch's back loop with 1, next with our second, next with our third, next with our fourth back loop slip. From here, continue to repeat our 4 back loop half, 4 back loop slip to reach the end of the row. The last set of stitches for this row should be 4 back loop halves because we started with 4 back loop halves. We are back and our row 3 is completed. Now, since it is a 4-row repeat, we're going to chain 2 and flip. And like I said, for every even number row, it is going to be a repeat of what our previous row stitches look like. So once we flip our work, it's going to look like 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So we're going to start with 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So we're all going to chain 2 and flip. So getting started on a row 4, we're all going to yarn over and insert with our first back loop half. Into that next with our second, next with our third, next with our fourth back loop half. Then the next set of stitches look like back loop slip, so I'll be doing 4 back loop slips. So there's my first, my second, third, and fourth. From here, just continue with our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips to reach the end of the row. We are back and our first 4 rows are complete. Now what we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 4 previous rows, making sure that all the rows are within the back loops until we now have a portion that can stretch, because it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, around the widest part of our calf. Then I'll meet everyone back once we have rows that is in multiples of 4. When we have that width, then we can seam up the calf portion together. We are back. I have just completed the width of my leg warmer. Now I have a total of 36 rows. This width is just about 8.5 inches or 21 centimeters. That is unstretched. Now what we're going to do from here is seam up the calf portion. So the bottom is going to be where our hook currently is. The first thing we're going to do is insert our stitch marker into any stitch that is in multiples of 8 from the top right where our calf gets a little too tight. So placing the bottom of our piece, so that is our hook end right at our ankle, we're just going to pinch all the way up until we reach, should roughly be about mid-calf for everyone, where the leg warmers start to get a little tight. Then go ahead and insert your stitch marker. So from the top, I've inserted my stitch marker into the 40th stitch. Remember, it does need to be in multiples of 8. That's just about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to do a single crochet seam from where we're at all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. So from here, we're going to fold our work in half, making sure that we're looking at the bottom of the almond stitch. Now the front of the almond stitch is going to have these little pockets, and the back is going to have these little bulges. We want to take a look at the back first, so that once we have our seam, it'll all be along the inside. So we're just going to fold our work in half, then insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1. Then from here, we're just going to single crochet in through both panels at the same time. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert. First stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front, insert. Next stitch into the back, insert, and single. We're just going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up until we're worked into the stitch that's right before our stitch marker stitch. Once we have that, do a chain up a 1 and cut. Then we can fill in the calf portion. So we are back and we have just completed the calf seam. Now from here, what we're going to do is just fill in the upper portion of our leg just to make sure that everything is fitting nicely and so we don't just have a straight tube. So what we're all going to do from here is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're then going to insert our hook into the slip stitch corner of our leg warmers. So if you're looking at the top corners, we are going to have a corner that ends with slip stitches and another corner that ends with half double crochets. We're going to want to insert our hook into the slip stitch corner, which should also be our tail end corner, and we're going to do our back loop halves, back loop slips all the way down until we reach our seam. We're going to start by inserting our yarn onto our hook. We're going to pull through and start with a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, we just want the height. Then from here, 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So yarn over into that first stitch's back loop with 1 back loop half, into that next stitch's back loop with a second, next stitch's back loop with a third, next stitch's back loop with a fourth. From here, 4 back loop slips, then just continue to repeat our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips until we all have 4 stitches left right before our seam. Then I'll meet you back. So we've just made our way all the way down with our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, leaving 4 stitches before our calf seam. Now what we're going to do from here is 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3. So the last set of stitches that we all should have done should have been 4 back loop halves. What we're going to do from here, into that 4th to last stitch, we're going to insert with 1 back loop slip, then into the last 3, a decrease of 3 back loop slips. So into that 3rd to last stitch, pull through, 2nd to last, pull through, and last, once we have these 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 of these loops. We're then going to insert a stitch marker into the top of this stitch because this is the middle of one side. Then working on the other side of our seam, we're going to start with a decrease as well. Now working our way up this side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Starting with a yarn over into that first available stitch's back loop, and that first available stitch is on the other side of our seam. We're going to insert, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops and make sure you insert a stitch marker into that stitch as well. Once when that decrease is completed, we're all going to do 1 additional half double crochet. Then from here, we're going to do 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down to reach the end of the row. Then I'll meet you back. Now our first fill-in row for our calf is completed. Now to get started on the following row, we're all going to chain 1 and flip. Start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down, leaving 3 stitches right before our following stitch marker stitch. Then I'll meet you back. We are back and we have left a total of 3 stitches right before our next stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we're going to do 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3. So the last set of stitches that we all should have done should have been 2 back loop slips. So into that next stitch, insert with 1 back loop slip, then into the next, the following, and into the stitch marker stitch, a decrease of 3 back loop slips. So into that 3rd to last, pull through, 2nd to last, pull through, and into that last, which should be our stitch marker stitch. I did take mine out. We're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then we're going to work our way up the other side, and we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that next available stitch, which should be our stitch marker stitch. I did take mine out. We're going to insert, pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, and into that next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5 of those loops. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decrease. Then working our way up, we're going to start with 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that next stitch's back loop with 1, next stitch's back loop with 2, and next stitch's back loop with our 3rd. From here, continue with the rest of our row, starting with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our second fill-in row. Now we should have 4 less stitches than our first fill-in row. Now we're going to do our third. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down until we have 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch again. So we've made our way down with our third fill-in row, and we have left 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch. The last set of stitches we all should have been 4 back loop halves. So just like our previous rows, we're going to do 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3 back loop slip. Now that we have completed our 1 back loop slip, then our decrease of 3 back loop slip, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that decreased stitch. Then working our way up the other side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Now that we have our decrease of 3 back loop halves, make sure you insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then we're all going to do just 1 back loop half, then continue working our way up the row, starting with 4 back loop slip, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way up. We are back and our third fill-in row is complete. Now to get started on our fourth. What we're all going to do is chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, making our way down till we have 3 stitches left before our first stitch marker stitch. We've made our way down with our row 4, leaving 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch. Now what we're going to do is 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3 back loop slip. Now our 1 slip stitch and decrease of 3 back loop slips are complete. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decreased stitch, and working our way up the other side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. And now that our decrease of 3 back loop halves is completed, we're now going to do 3 back loop halves into the following 3 stitches. Then once we have that, complete the row with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our first 4 rows for our fill-in portion. Now all we're going to do is just continue to repeat our 4 previous rows until we now have a portion that can stretch around our leg, and then we're going to seam it all up together. Now after the 4 rows that we all just did together, I am actually all done with the width that I need for my leg portion. But all we're going to do from here is the same single crochet seam that we did for the calf. So just to talk you through it, we're going to flip our work wrong side out. Inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back, do our single crochet seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Do a chain of 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. We are back and we have just completed seaming up the width portion of our leg warmers. Now from here we just have the top and the bottom band to do, so let's get started on the bottom band together. Let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert your hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our leg warmer. The bottom is going to be the skinnier side. We're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now what we're going to do, since we have a 4-row repeat, we're going to put 1 single crochet into each of our side slip stitch rows, 2 single crochet into the first side half double, then 1 single crochet into the second side half double. So what we mean by that is finding our first side row, which is a side slip stitch row for me. I'm going to find that top loop, insert with 1 single. Into our following side row, which is another side slip stitch row, insert with 1 single. Our following side row is a side half. We're going to insert in through that top loop with 2 single crochets. There's 1. Same top loop with a second. Then into that following side row, which should be a side half, insert with just 1. And we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. So we've just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now from here, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 10. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do our slip stitches all the way down. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Then from here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, making our way all the way down. We've made our way down with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just into that next available stitch, into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still does not count as a stitch, and flip our work. And from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So making sure that we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to find that last stitch from our previous row, insert in through that back loop with a slip stitch. Then from here, continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain one, flip our work, one back loop slip into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We've made our way down with our first 3 rows. Now we're going to connect it into the base together again. It will be done the same way as our previous rows, so altogether just finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch, flip our work, and one back loop slip into every stitch. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around, no increases, no decreases. Then I'll meet you back so we can seam it all up together. So we have made our way all the way around with our bottom band, so our back loop slip stitch rows. Now we're going to seam it. Now this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. So what we're going to do is making sure that our work is still flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything. Then from here, we're all going to chain 1. Finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert only in through that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut. We are back and now we're ready to get started on the top band. The top band is going to be done exactly the same way as the bottom band, so just to talk y'all through it. Making sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the top of our piece and do the same single crochet row that we did for the bottom. So 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, 2 single crochet into the first side half double crochet row, and 1 single crochet into the following side half double. Make your way all the way around, then I'll meet you back. So our single crochet row for the top band is complete. Now from here, we're going to do more back loop slip stitch rows exactly the same way that we did the bottom band for the top. So right after we slip stitched into that chain space, make a chain the length that we'd like for the top band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 25, then do our back loop slip stitch rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our top band. Now we're going to seam it up, and it is going to be done exactly the same way as our bottom band's seam. So just to talk you guys through it, making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. We're going to do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up a 1 and cut. Then once that's completed, we're going to make a second one. Then we're going to be all done. Once we have that, the last thing we're going to have to do is simply weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!